Good morrow, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Fantasy Folk, where we discuss all things in the fantasy genre from books and games to television and film. My name is Jordan Wiegand, and with me, as my traveling companion down these fantastical roads, is Ron. How do you fare this morrow, Ron?
I fare well, sir. But no, in all seriousness, dude, I'm so excited to be here with you and to finally be starting this and to just get this chance to dive into all these worlds that we love so much, but haven't really had a chance to talk about on any of our other shows yet. So it's a very exciting time, and I'm excited to start down this path.
Yeah, something that happened pretty quickly. I
Mhm.
would say less than a week.
Yep.
And once we kind of got the thing rolling, right? We were like committed, and we
It
were
was
doing
just
this. And
one thing after another. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, um, first thing, yeah, because we wanted to talk Game of Thrones, right? Like that
Yeah.
is a thing. And then I was like, oh, instead of just putting it on Logjam Lounge, like let's put it on a fantasy feed. And then all these other ideas start coming, and
Mhm.
it's like, all right, yeah, we're doing this.
There's enough here for a show in
Yeah.
itself. Yeah, very much so. Yeah. We're a little late. We maybe could have started like a couple months ago when House of the Dragon started, but don't drag us too much, everybody. We're here now, and it's going to be a lot of fun going forward with all the stuff that we
And
have to.
I just had a newborn. It would not have
Yeah,
worked for House of
yeah.
the Dragon season 2.
that
But
little thing. There's that little wrinkle.
we're very excited for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which I believe is premiering next year. War of the Rohirrim later next year.
Mhm.
And our actual coverage of Middle Earth will start with Rings of Power later this weekend. But we just want to kind of get everybody used to us and what we like about the genre when we first fell in love with the genre. And like, I feel like podcasts that just leap right into here's the first thing we're covering
Mhm.
can kind of lose some things. Like this episode, I'll probably have pinned on the Spotify for like, here's where to start. And people can just listen to it whenever. And it'll be our thoughts on just anything. And, we're going to be sharing our favorite fantasy stuff, favorite memories, all that good stuff is what we're going to be talking about today. And it's stuff that you can probably relate to as you're driving in your car listening and say, oh, I remember when that movie came out or what my thoughts were when this was out. And you can even share those with us. Spotify has a comment feature, or you'll be able to email us. The good thing about naming a podcast before you are getting fully set up is that I was able to check and make sure that the handle is free on every website. So, unlike our Marvel podcast, To the Infinity and Saga and Beyond, which has different handle for each platform, we are at Fantasy Folk Pod on all of our social medias, and you can email us fantasyfolkpod@gmail.com. If you can't remember that, there is a link tree in the notes of the show or in the description on YouTube. You'll be able to just click that, and it has all of our social links there as well. So make sure you contact us if you're listening and say, hey, my favorite thing is this. And we can read them online, on the air at other times if people leave those comments. But um, just wanted to create a fun community that can share the love of this genre.
You
Which we don't,
must cut up. Sorry, wrong show.
yeah, which we don't get to talk about a lot. We don't get to talk about this stuff a lot. And I feel like since Game of Thrones, this genre has taken off in movies and television that there is more to talk about. So that's also another plus. Or else we'd be sitting here just talking about the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Which is still going to be a lot of fun in its own right
yes.
when we start diving into that. Well, obviously, Rings of Power being our first topic next week.
Yeah. All right. So I have a question for you, Ron.
Mhm.
I was introduced to you through superheroes
Mhm.
and through Ravens football. Okay.
Mhm.
And then I didn't notice really until I started following you how much you liked things like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Walking Dead, which we're not really covering on here, but just like
Mhm.
I didn't know all that stuff until I really started following you. And then, I feel like it's one of those things where it was a new layer to you that I didn't know, and then now we're connecting on that layer, and it's
Mhm.
just, how did you get into it? What was the first thing that like drew you to the genre?
So it's kind of an interesting thing because I've always been a fan of the genre, but it wasn't until like the aforementioned popularity of Thrones just blowing this whole thing up that I really, I would say, like fell in love with it. Like I loved fantasy stuff on a like a case by case basis, I would say. You know, I loved the Lord of the Rings movies. I saw the first two Harry Potter movies coming up, and I always liked those. You know, I dabbled in some Magic the Gathering cards with my brother and stuff, but it wasn't until that show came around that it really, it just kind of exploded for me personally. I think what drew me to it and what still draws me to it to this day, and it's something that I think I would have appreciated Lord of the Rings a lot sooner when I was younger, if I had the appreciation for this kind of thing today, or if I had it back then. And that's just the depth to all of these worlds and how meticulously they're crafted. And this sort of like, you know, pull up a map of Middle Earth or Westeros and point to any single random point. There's a pretty good chance you're going to find a dense well of lore, you know, spanning back hundreds and thousands of years, even in some cases. And it's just this level of detail and immersiveness that you can like legitimately dive into these worlds and they feel real, even though they're not. It's just that level of care and detail is something that it's just like it always hooks me, and especially in a realm like this. It's just such a cool thing on its own, and to put that level of care and detail into it too, it's just it makes it very hard for me to skip projects in this genre because they're so well thought out in that way.
Interesting. So, you know, you'd mentioned before, so you just mentioned you saw the first two Harry Potter movies. And I
Mhm.
know offline we talked about how you weren't a super big fan of, you're not a big Potter head, right?
Yeah.
In that regard. Was it something that you like, was it only those first two you saw, or did you see all of them? Like, or did you just kind of miss that like wave of it?
So I saw the first two and I kind of fell off it
Okay.
after that. Yeah, I it wasn't just wasn't my favorite thing. You know, I never really had any hate for it or anything like that. I just even as a kid I liked Lord of the Rings more.
Hmm.
But it just it was stuff that I enjoyed but didn't really dive too deep into. And then by the time that I got into it like full dive in as an adult, like Game of Thrones was the first one I grasped onto. And so like
Yeah.
to have that like I don't know, it's just I feel like let me think of how to put it. I feel like because I started with like Thrones, like
Something
that's
so mature type of thing.
yes, yeah, that's the one that like kind of formed my opinion on the things that I like in the fantasy genre. And Harry Potter is just far different in you know in the way they operate, even though they're still in that same fantasy realm.
It's what people call used to call low fantasy. Now
Hmm.
I think people have started shifting calling it portal fantasy. So you
Oh,
have high fantasy, which is what Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings are, you know, where it is a whole new world, nothing to do with our world. And then you have like portal fantasy, which is where it's our normal world, but there's a portal into the magic
okay.
and the fantasy, and that's what Harry Potter is, right? He's a normal kid until he's told he's not, and then he gets introduced to the world. So that's why some people are big high fantasy fans, and some people will
Mhm,
be like, I like more that style
mhm.
fantasy. So
Yeah,
sounds
I
like you're
definitely.
more of a high fantasy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I definitely lean more into the high fantasy aspect of it. Like when I'm watching something or like giving something a shot from this genre, I want to be as immersed in it and away
Mhm.
from the you know the mundane world that we know as possible. So maybe that could be you know a big part of why I wasn't quite so drawn to Harry Potter. I never really thought of it like that, but it's definitely possible.
So I would say my intro to it was Harry Potter. And I think it's kind of really general when it comes to our generation and my
Yeah,
age. I am 33. So I was 10 when the first movie came out.
same year as Fellowship of the Ring too. That what a year,
Yes.
2001. Like, gosh,
Well, I didn't see Fellowship in theaters.
neither did I.
Okay. So I saw Sorcerer's Stone in theaters, or
Mhm.
as the Brits would say, Philosopher's Stone. And I have an interesting history with this. So my sister already owned the book Harry Potter. She's not a reader. Okay, she's not a reader. She got probably a chapter in. Okay, and then was like, no thanks. Um, I wasn't really a reader at this point either. So this is fifth grade. This is the year 9/11, right?
Mm.
I'm in fifth grade, and I kind of get introduced to it by. It's funny because this would shape the rest of my life. Okay, and I became big into this book and into reading, which is seen as academia, right?
Mhm.
Because I didn't do my homework. Okay. So when I didn't do my homework, they had a rule then that I could not do recess. Could not do
Mm.
recess. And I had to pick a book from the carousel of books that they had in the corner of the room. And I was like, I've heard good things about Harry Potter. All my friends have read it. Like, I'm gonna pick it up and give it a whirl. Earlier that year, my friend was reading Harry Potter. One of my friends, Walter, was reading Harry Potter, and we were in like math class. I don't know how we got on the topic of this. We were split up into groups, right? And they have this conversation. Walter and somebody else. I totally forget who the other person was.
Shout out
But
Walter.
they had read the book and Walter was reading it. The other
Mhm.
person had already read the book, and they're talking about the Philosopher's Stone in it. And like they said something like, this is going to be spoilers, of course, for a very old book and movie. But he was saying something about how he didn't know how they were going to get the Sorcerer's Stone or where it was. And the friend who had read the book was like, do you want me to tell you? And he's like, no, I'm reading it. And I was
Mhm.
like, tell me. I will never read this. That's what I said. I was like, the Harry Potter train had missed me, I thought, right? I was like, I'm
Yeah.
never reading this. I'm not a reader. Tell me what it is. And they said, it's in the Mirror of Erised. And I was like, means nothing to me.
I was gonna say I have no clue what
I
that
couldn't
means.
repeat that. I couldn't repeat that to Walter if I wanted to. All right.
That
So
is crazy. That's like a butterfly effect moment. Like if you had just done your homework, you might
yeah.
not be a fantasy fan today. Like
Yeah, exactly. I may not even have been reading as much. I don't talk about it a lot, but becoming a reader shaped me into wanting to be a writer, right? And like I write in my spare time when I'm able to, and I wanted to be an author, that kind of stuff. So it's like totally shaped my life in that regard. And led to a gateway of everything else. It was like a gateway drug to the rest of the fantasy stuff. And that's why Portal Fantasy can be that type of thing, right? Because
Mhm.
it takes something that maybe people think they weren't going to be interested in, and they
Mhm.
say, here's the normal world. Actually, it's not normal. Here's this. And then people say, all right, let's graduate to the next stage of that.
Mhm.
And that's what I started doing. I saw Lord of the Rings. Unfortunately, the what like okay, it was on VHS. We watched this on VHS. It was like two
Yep.
tapes, right?
Yep.
And a person that my mom worked with at the time let us borrow it. She unfortunately passed away due to, I think, cancer
Oh.
afterwards. And we borrowed it. My mom's like, "Hey, look, good things about this. Heard great things about this." I look at it and I'm like, "What is this? Some Harry Potter knockoff?" Is what I said. I was like, "You got a Gandalf, like Dumbledore guy looking
Yeah,
here. We
yeah,
got
that's true. That is hilarious. I hadn't even thought of it. It would look
yes,
like one of the like a knockoff Harry Potter that you'd see in like a dollar VHS bin. You know what I mean? In like a
yes,
gas
yeah,
station or something. Yeah.
yeah." You're like, you see Frodo, and I'm like, Harry Potter without glasses. Like, what
Yeah,
is this?
like the Lord of the Rings, the Sorcerer's Stone. Like there's enough like that it
Yeah.
seems like it's in the same ballpark, but not
Samwise
exactly.
Gamgee kind of looks like Ron a bit. You're
Yeah,
like, this is kind of
yeah,
odd.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's hilarious.
and of course, I was just a dumb kid. I didn't know Lord of the Rings was a thing. Like, I didn't know it was a book. I didn't know any of that type of stuff. And I think it was then my mom saying, like, no, this is like based off of something. Cause like the cartoon Lord of the Rings was around when my mom was young. So she's like, no, this is like a thing. This has been a thing. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
it's funny though. Cause I've kind of always had that thought. because I had Harry Potter first. Like A Series of Unfortunate Events. Have you read those books?
When we get into our favorite books, I was gonna bring that up because that
Okay,
to me teeters right on the edge of fantasy, but I loved those books
me
coming up.
too. But when I first saw the cover with Klaus having his glasses, like Harry
Mhm.
Potter knockoff, what
Yeah.
is this?
Everyone's Harry Potter. What the hell? Yeah.
And I'm sure like Lemony
Everywhere I
Snicket was
go, I
probably
see his face.
yeah, Lemony Snicket's probably writing this stuff ahead of time, whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm so glad you brought up those books, dude. I thought that was gonna be one that was gonna like go over the head, but yeah, I used to love those things.
oh yeah, they were great, and they were like 13 of them. It was
Hmm.
consistently coming out every couple months.
Yeah.
But so then we watched Fellowship of the Ring. We probably did it in 2 nights because I'm a school kid,
Mm.
So
Yeah.
how long it is? It's like, all right, we'll watch like a half hour and a half tonight, an hour and a half tomorrow,
Mhm.
whatever. And I really enjoyed it. And it was right before we probably caught it in 2002.
Okay.
Um, and then I got really big into it. We bought it on DVD. Then it's like um, Two Towers were coming out,
That was
and
that we will
that
never
was
see that again, by the way. The 2001, 2002,
oh
2003,
no,
bang, bang, bang. Like, could you like even mentioning that to a movie studio today would make their head explode.
yeah. The closest you would get to it would probably be like the Infinity War and Endgame,
Mhm.
or the MCU as a whole, where they're doing a couple movies a year and
Mhm.
as a story, but like it's not the same characters every time, and
No.
um,
They're long movies too.
they
These are
are.
like even
But it
the
was
the
cheap. It
short
was
version.
cheaper because they were filming them all at once, right?
Mhm.
So you get everybody's stuff out of the way. You don't have to like reset up the sets. You don't have to
Yeah.
do any of that stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so then, yeah, Lord of the Rings became a big part of my life then, and I just remember the build up to Two Towers. So I have a small bladder, right? And that's you go in worrying to Two Towers, like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And my mom was like sick or something and couldn't go, so my dad had to take me. My dad, not a fantasy guy, right?
Mhm.
He's like Harry Potter, Schmary Smarter, right? Like
Yeah.
he doesn't that in Star
Is
Wars he
that
didn't like.
Pokemon? Like, yeah.
Right. He has now since watched, um Star Wars and got into that and stuff, but he was like not into any of that stuff. So he was going to take me. So we had to sit down and I had to catch him up on Fellowship before we went to see Two Towers.
Mhm.
And I just remember like he actually did enjoy them. I don't think he would sit and watch them now though.
Mhm.
But he did enjoy them then. It's weird to think he was probably my age now when we were doing that.
Yeah.
Um, and with that, we were like I said, I have a small bladder. We're going to see Two Towers. I did not. I usually go like once or twice during a movie. I did not go at all during Two Towers
You're
at
locked in.
all. I was locked in. It was impressive. It was very impressive for me at 12 or
Who
11.
could think about pissing when you're watching the Battle of Helm's
Right.
Deep? Like,
Yeah, exactly. It didn't help. It was raining though. But
yeah, yeah. You're like sitting there like the meme of the kid holding it in with like the
yeah,
vein popping just
yeah. Good thing there was no
oh,
post credit scenes. It's like, all right, well, let's go.
yeah, for real. Yeah. Oh, good stuff.
um,
Good stuff.
but yeah. So, did you see Two Towers in theaters at all? Or did you catch that stuff later too?
Yeah, I caught them all in home video
Okay,
afterwards.
all
I
right.
didn't see any of them in the theater. The Harry Potter ones I did see in the theater. But yeah, no, I didn't see them in the theaters. But I recently they released all of them like in my theater, and I'm kicking myself for not going. And I'm sure
Mm.
they'll do it again at some point, and I'm definitely gonna
Yeah,
make
it's
a
the
point to go.
extended ones too. It's
Yeah, yeah. You want to talk
that's
about
a
having a
tough set.
small
4
bladder, buddy?
hours. Yeah, I don't know how many times I'd go during that.
Yeah,
All
I might
right.
like put a catheter in me for the.
Yeah. But I started getting into the books then,
Mhm.
and I just like some fond memories of that time was sharing those books with my grandmother,
Mm.
who would also start watching those movies and we would read the books. And I would like then let her borrow my books, or you know what I'm saying, and like she would read them as well, and we would just kind of talk about that. And you know, the another thing that sticks out to me too is, you know how Legolas has like the two swords
Yeah.
sometimes.
The mini,
All right.
they're like kind of bigger than daggers, but smaller than swords.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So my friend Zach in Zachariah in our wood shop class. We had a wood shop class in
Oh
seventh
yeah.
grade,
Yep.
and we had the files, the wood files, and he would have two of those and just act like he's Legolas. You know, we were nerds. All right, it was like,
Yeah. That's awesome.
yeah. So that stood out to me. And then like I would play those Lord of the Rings PS2 games with my dad, which was
Mm,
Two Towers and Return of the King, which were I do kind of miss the era of tie-in games, because those were really
yes.
good tie-in games.
Yep.
They had great level up systems. They were fun as co-op, couch co-op, and I don't know, it was just like so much fun. And that was like such a big part of my life then. You know, I
Yeah.
was like totally middle school. I got so taken over by Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and Star Wars still, but
Mm.
Star Wars was almost at the end with Revenge of the Sith in my
Yep.
eighth grade, you know?
Yeah.
So it was,
Then we had like a 10-year drought, and there was like kind
yeah.
of nothing to fill it, but this kind of stuff.
Um, Sorry, I feel like I'm talking so much more.
No, you're good. I'm excited to hear this. How it kind of came to be for you, because we're very much on like opposite ends of the spectrum. It feels where like this for you, it was very formative at a young age, and it kind of
Yeah,
forged a lot of what you like and enjoy today. Whereas I watched it and enjoyed it back then, but it wasn't until I was almost 20 years old where I really got my hooks in it and just fell in love with the genre as a whole. So it's two different ways of getting there, and it's kind of interesting. It's a good dynamic to have between the two of us. We don't have the same journey, but we all
right.
still ended up in the same destination, so to speak.
Well, I mentioned this to you about my fun story about writing. Okay,
Hmm.
so this is where I'll bring it in, because this is very inspired by the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter stuff. So,
Hmm.
like I said, I've become a reader. I want to write. I mentioned him early. My friend Zachariah at the time. I haven't spoken to him, but I mean, like back then, we were like best
Yeah.
friends. Okay, we both had crushes on Emma Watson. Okay, so we had like this rivalry as well, like as if we're actually going to meet her,
Yeah, she's
right?
mine. Yeah.
She's mine, no, right?
9-year-old
And
Jordan in shambles.
um one of my first crushes, right? I just remember sitting in the theater and she came in on the screen and I was like, "Oh my god, who is this?"
Hmm.
Right? She's a year older than me, so it's not
Yeah.
creepy, okay?
No, no.
Um I was young back then. I'm not like 30 at the
Yeah.
time. Who is this?
Yeah.
Um so
Whoa. Oh
so me
God,
and my
no.
friend both have crushes on her, and we were both big into Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. So he mentions he wants to start writing, and I was wanting to start writing. So we're like, oh, we'll
Mm,
write a series together, right? And he was supposed to write the prequel, like the a book, a set of three, okay, or
mm.
whatever. And I was supposed to write the follow up series to it. We were
Oh
splitting
damn.
duties
Oh
like
wow.
that, okay.
Some serious world building. Holy crap.
And our characters were Jordan, Zach, and Emma, okay. And both Jordan and Zach liked Emma, and it was this whole thing, okay. Very seventh grade.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Um,
Yeah.
Not great. I still have these books, by the way. I wrote them. I wrote all three.
How long were they?
Hundreds of pages.
What? You have
They're
to
in my
send this to
parents'
me. Oh my
house. I
God.
need to go get them. I'm
Holy
going over there
crap.
on Sunday. I have to pick them up. I
You've
have
got
to
like the
freaking.
next hit HBO show just sitting in your mom's basement over there. Like, what the
Well,
hell?
it's a big knockoff of Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. So
Apparently, everything is, according to Jordan.
yeah, yeah. So Harry Potter aspect of it is like the spells. Like I feel like I used like J.K. Rowling style spells, not
Mhm.
Gandalf style, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then but our characters were rangers like Aragorn. You know what
yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like and it was very but it was also mixed with Star Wars a bit, because I feel like it sometimes if I'm remembering correctly, sometimes when they had the swords, they would like push a button and the sword would pop out. I was like kind of taking from Star Wars instead of a lightsaber,
Yeah.
just like the
Okay.
sword slipping out, you know?
So that's more like inspiration as opposed to,
Yeah,
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 you're not capturing the essence of Star. I was
yeah,
gonna say because that could be a bit of uh, weird mix, trying to do
yeah.
like space stuff.
Lightsabers with it. No,
Yeah, it's a
it was
very
all still in
fine
the
line to
fantasy
navigate.
setting.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, the first book was called The Road to Berlin. Berlin was a city in the town, like in the
Mhm.
country, And I just remember we were trying to coordinate. He was like, my story is going to end at this point. I was like, all right, then I'll pick it up from there. He never finished these stories. Okay.
God damn
So then I had to start filling in
it.
the background on stuff because I'm starting like in the middle of it and I'm
Mhm.
referencing stuff that happened that has that nobody
That he
would
hasn't
know.
written. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So then, Lost started airing my eighth grade, and they introduced me to like flashbacks every episode. So I'm starting
Mhm.
to write flashbacks into my story. I'm like,
Ah.
so it's became this big mix of everything that was inspirational to me. But I told this story on the Pod Awakens. I don't know if it's aired yet. It's on the Clone Wars watch
Okay.
with Logan, and a name of a character came up, or a name of a city, or I think it was a planet name came up, and I was like, this name just sounds like baloney, right? it,
Mhm.
it sounds like something I would have came up with. And then I shared this story, and I just told my wife about this. She never knew this. The villain, one of the villains of my story, had this type of name. This is how bad I was at names back then. Like I said, so Jordan, Zach, and Emma, main heroes. The
Uh-huh.
villain's name, I'll let you finish your drink, was Gertis Fertile. Something it sounds like the Swedish chef would say in the Muppets, right?
Yeah,
Gertis
yeah,
Fertile? Yeah.
Gertie's fool. Yeah. Holy crap. I mean, he sounds like a villain. That's not a very like appealing name.
No, but it sounds silly. It sounds so
Yeah,
silly. If I
yeah.
was reading that now, I'd be like, this is the villain, Gertis Fertile? Like, what
Yeah.
is this?
Big taser
Um,
face vibes.
yes, yeah. And it's spelled like GERDISFERDLE, right? I'm
Oh
pretty
man.
sure I have it right. I haven't looked at it in 20 years,
So
but
funny.
yeah.
It really does sound like something the Swedish chef would say. Gertie's Gertie.
But my friend Jimmy had Battle for Middle Earth too,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And it was the real time strategy game. And
Mhm.
they have where you can make your own heroes and villains. And when I was over his house, I would make Gertis Fertile. I would make like characters from my story in the game, and I'm like, oh, I'm using the Gertis Fertile in the Battle for
Yeah.
Middle Earth too. And he's probably like, what a loser this guy is.
Hey, if that makes you a loser, then so am I, dude. Because I still do that with like D&D, my D&D characters in Baldur's Gate and stuff like that,
Well,
or
I'm
like
so tempted
Skyrim.
when Baldur's Gate comes out to make Gertis Fertile. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
tempted.
When you start playing, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. You may as well.
But yeah, so that like I wrote 3 of those books, I believe. I think it was 3. I may have stretched it to 4. They're not good, I'll tell you that much. And I don't expect them to be. It was like the first 4 books I'd written,
Mhm.
but it was they weren't good. But I'm so tempted to go back and read them now, and it just kind of like it was like I wrote them. I didn't like put them in computer. So
Mhm.
these are like written, and then they're on like these they have like these nice covers
Mhm.
that are kind of like where you could write on the cover with pencil. It's like a almost like a folder, or it's like a cover sheet type thing.
Mhm.
um but I had some of those, and I just like started putting the book in there, and then you could add pages as I was writing. I believe the first one is 150 pages or so, and then I believe the second one got in the 200s of like lined, notebook papers,
Yeah, yeah.
and then front and back, and then probably like 200 plus for the third one.
God
Um,
damn. Wow, that is
I would just
crazy.
sit there and write. It was crazy before cell phones.
That is awesome. Yeah, true. When we had attention spans. Yeah, no, that is awesome, dude. Also, I should mention. So I just thought of something that may have unintentionally like laid the groundwork for me being a fan of this stuff as a kid, even though it didn't like immediately resonate. My mom's favorite movie, she was obsessed with The Wizard of Oz. So I think
Oh,
that was very much like the sort of groundwork being laid for me, like being into to all this stuff. She was also big into the like the Disney like fairy tale kind, you know, the
yeah, yeah.
Cinderella, the Beauty and the Beast, and all that kind of stuff. And you know, I came up watching that as we all do, but I didn't even think of it when we were, you know, talking about how you know how I first got into this stuff. But in hindsight, I think you know that definitely, even though I guess it kind of took me a little longer to really appreciate this world, I think that was probably a big proponent or big reason why I also got so into it. You know, here in my later years, and I never even realized it until this very second.
Yeah, sometimes that's what it takes, right? Is sitting there and analyzing it and being like,
Yeah, yeah.
why is
Actually
this
being like,
hitting? You
"Huh,
know?
yeah, yeah." If we weren't doing this, I would have never thought of, you know, like why did I get into this stuff? So it's good that, you know, to be able to kind of talk this stuff out and take that trip down memory lane for sure.
All right, so let's move on to some fun questions. Moving on from our histories with the genre, but um, let's go with favorite fantasy world. You mentioned how Game of Thrones introduced you to it, so I'm assuming it's going to be Westeros or
It
just that
is.
whole world with Essos as well. But
Yeah,
um,
across the
that's what it
narrow
is, right?
sea. Yes, across the narrow sea to Pentos. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is absolutely Westeros. I am, especially now that I'm working my way through the Song of Ice and Fire novels. It's just so damn built out, and just you know, it's all of these families and this stuff that they didn't have the chance to get to or the time to get to in the show. That really just, I mean, and the show itself did a great job of you know making the world feel big and stuff like that. But I don't think the appreciation started like to this extent until I got into these books, and it's like, god damn, it's just like how do you like build an entire world and an entire thousands of histories of years worth of lore. And I know obviously Game of Thrones is not the only ones to do this, but like we said, it's the one that really resonated with me and the one that I got my hooks into. So it blows my mind. It just I love the world, and it's all so distinctly different as well. You know, you've got the north, and you got all the way to the south, obviously with like with the Martells and just
Yeah, we famously
Dorne.
don't have north or south in our world.
No, but you it's all, but it's really not. It's like it's more like a continent. You know what I mean? And it's
Yes,
just
yeah, yeah.
having all these different places. Like I said, Dorne, and then you get in the middle, and it's kind of the more when you the more I would say kind of classic high fantasy. What you think of, like with King's Landing, Casterly Rock, and you know all of the more classic, you know, castles and that kind of stuff. Harrenhal. So it just I just love it, dude. Westeros is my jam, and it. I don't think there's ever going to be anything that's going to be able to top it for me. What about you though?
So I think we'll have to, we'll definitely. Um, this whole podcast came up from us wanting to do one episode talking about Game of Thrones and all that. We'll still do that. That'll probably be after Rings of Power. So we'll dive more into what we love so much about that. But
Mm-hmm.
um, good question. What is my favorite fantasy? Well, you think I would have this answer, but this wasn't the one that I made on the. I didn't make this one a question on the sheet. On
Yeah.
the Instagram post we're gonna make based off of this. So
It's tough for you, yeah, because you also having that super deep connection to like Harry Potter and stuff, and it's like
yeah.
for me it was an easy choice. For you, it's like you know picking your favorite kid.
I think I would have to lean Middle Earth just because I don't think like what do you say to Harry Potter? Do I say Wizarding World? Because like it takes place in our world, just as a
Yeah,
different, like it's a little
yeah.
tougher that way. But I think I'd have to go with Middle Earth. Uh, it is there's something special about it, I think, and just the hero's journey that Frodo goes on. Um,
The whimsy of it all.
Yeah, and there is more whimsy in like The Hobbit, so like if you
Yeah.
want that in that setting, you can still get that. But then there's
Mhm.
also like this big epic tale, right?
Yeah.
That follows Frodo.
Mm.
And uh, th- th- I- controversial, I would say probably, but I am more of the movie guy than the book guys for Lord of the
Mm.
Rings.
Yep.
And I just that's what I experienced first. So that is what. And as a kid, when I did read the books, as a kid, I was like, oh, we're at a boring part. There's no
Yeah.
battle here. I was
Yeah.
11, I'm like,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, but the movies with the music, the Howard Shore music, right? Like, and just the locales they shot at in New Zealand. Like, I was so excited when they announced they were making a TV show on
Mm.
Amazon, because it was like, yeah, let's revisit that. Let's revisit the world. And um there's a lot of stories to tell in that time. um we'll see if all of them are worth telling. We're getting a Hunt for Gollum movie. We'll see how that
Mhm.
goes, right? Like,
Yeah. Hopefully
um
better than the video game they released last year or 2 years ago, whatever it
yeah,
was.
yeah, yikes.
Yeah. I do want to go back and touch on something you mentioned though about the books
Yeah.
because it's a good point to make. Um, I've the grew up with technology millennial that I am, like, was never really like the biggest reader. Like post childhood into like early to mid like 20s and stuff. I just wasn't a big reader, but I do credit this genre for getting me back into reading and like making me interested in picking up books again, like, which, a few years ago is something I would have, even with this kind of stuff that I love, it just, I wasn't a reader, but finally like diving in and being like, all right, let's see what all the fuss is about. And now I sit here hours a night reading these, thousands of page long books. It's just, it's been
Thousands
a
of
really,
words about food, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what George is describing, you're like,
Oh
oh,
my
okay.
god, the feasts! Are you kidding me? I love the feasts. They'll spend 2 pages just talking
Yes.
about bacon pies and fucking roasted quail and just, oh my god. But again, it's just the small little, like, the way that he paints every, like, you can picture yourself in the room of every single page of that book because he does such a good job of explaining it in detail. And it's definitely usurped the show for me already, even though currently I'm about 75% of the way through Storm of Swords. So I'm a little over halfway there in the entirety of the series. And I already love it vastly more than I love the show, which is saying a lot. It's not a slight on the show, even though
Right, right.
a lot of people like to hate on the end of it. We'll get to that. We'll get there with our spicy takes one day on how we feel about the end of Game of Thrones. But I just I've come to appreciate and love the books way more in these kind of adult years, and I can't wait to get into Tolkien for that same reason because I have
Mm.
not read the Tolkien books, but it's like it's almost like this this world like is like opened up to me in the form
Yeah.
of books, and it's like all this stuff that everyone's already read and like gone through and knows about, I get to experience now as an adult fresh, despite being a fan of these worlds for a long time. Like, to be able to now see this new take on them from
Right.
my perspective, a new take on them, it's just really really cool. So yeah, I credit fantasy with getting me back into reading, which is a damn good thing.
Yeah. The um I'm blanking on what I was about to say.
Oh
Sorry.
no, my bad, I cut you
No,
off.
no, you're good. You're good. Um what I was gonna say something about what you just said, and it's gone.
Oh no.
Um
Books,
Books.
immersive, yes, getting back, liking them more, trying to
Yeah,
dive
yeah.
into
I
them.
think that's just like part of I think sometimes people will be like, "Oh, you haven't read the books yet," and it's like, no. But the good thing is they're there for you, and then when you are
Exactly.
ready for them, you have a backlog of stuff you're able
Mhm.
to just dive into, right?
Yeah.
And I wish I had all the time in the world to read as much as I've been wanting to read.
Mhm.
It's something that when I was a kid, I would have all the time in the world, right? Like,
Yeah.
once I was done homework or whatever,
Mhm.
what else was I gonna do? The options were play Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
Get on our dial-up internet for a bit. Yeah.
Oh god.
Or watch some TV, which back then as well, like cable, and shows weren't on DVD yet, really, that started happening. But like your options were what was on the TV. I sound like such an old
I
guy,
know. I
but
was
it's
gonna
like
say, God, I'm gonna bust out my
we didn't
cane.
have like where you could just be like, "Oh, I want to watch this show right now."
Yeah.
So right now, I could do that. I could be like, "Oh, I want to watch Family Feud," and I could go to probably Pluto TV and watch Family Feud channel and watch all day
Hmm.
of it. Right
Yeah.
back then, it'd be like, "Well, that's not on until 7. I got a couple hours to kill.
Hmm.
I'm gonna grab a book and I'm gonna read." So
Yeah. And it was
yeah,
to your point, the only thing that you could really go back to, like, if you wanted your fix of a universe, books were the only way you could go back to them anytime you want, because there were no, streaming services or
yeah,
DVDs and stuff like that. Like, that was all we really kind of had, and that was, I think, a big reason why, as kids, it kind of like we clung to books a little more than I think they probably do today. Again, as I mentioned, once you could almost pinpoint it like perfectly with like when technology really took that big step with the internet and all that stuff,
yeah.
of like me falling off books, because it was like right around that,
Same
like 14,
iPhone.
15. Yeah, 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 yeah. So it's
Once
very crazy.
probably like I got an iPhone in 2012, 2013.
Hmm.
When you have that in your pocket the whole time and you have cell phone service everywhere, unlimited data, I can be sitting in like Jiffy Lube waiting for my oil to get changed, and I'll be like on Reddit or message boards,
Yeah.
like talking about stuff when instead I may have brought a book last time. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And like
Yep.
that's just kind of what it's like now. Or you're like
Hmm.
endlessly scrolling on Twitter, which is a cesspool. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So Tolkien, Middle Earth, favorite fantasy world. That's where we were.
Yes.
Okay. So let's get into some of the questions from the questionnaire that's going to be on the Instagram posts here. I actually already have all my answers filled out and I have it saved and ready to go. But I didn't ask you yet because I'm like, let's save that for real reactions while we're sitting here, discussing it.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to get my answers pulled up here too, so that way I make sure I'm saying the same answer. It hasn't changed. Okay, so let's go with favorite fantasy movie.
Movie. Okay. Um, So I would almost like to like be cute and say Wizard of Oz, just because, like, now thinking back, and like my entire house basically growing up was just nothing but Wizard of Oz like memorabilia. Like, she had the ruby slippers, the you know um what was that thing called? It was like something mint. I don't know if it might be, a dated reference, but they used to have like the statues. They were basically like the porcelain statues of, like, they would have like athletes and stuff like that. And my mom had like dozens, or not dozens, but numerous of them, these super expensive statues, and just anything you could think of. So I would love to say that, but I have to be honest and just be a little chalk. It is Fellowship of the Ring. I went
Okay.
back and forth on which of the Lord of the Rings is my favorite, but I think just being the one that kicks it all off, and starting and spending that time in the Shire and everything, and it's such a, like, a warm, and like, oh, after you get to the prequel stuff where they explain, like, with Sauron and everything that happened there. But like, just getting to be introduced to this world, and Frodo and Gandalf and all this stuff, I love it. And it truly, of the three, I think, felt the most like the hero's journey. Of course, the whole thing is the hero's journey, but just the sense of, like, just a group of, six weary travelers along the trail. Like, I feel like it gets a little, the scale grows as the movies progress, but in the beginning, in Fellowship, it still feels so small, and I love that about it. So I'd have to say Fellowship.
Um, I wasn't ignoring you, by the way. I was
No,
writing
you're
down the
fine.
answer in the thing. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I always kind of like. It's funny. For some of this stuff, I feel like my favorite stuff is always people's least favorite stuff. So,
Oh, okay.
my favorite is a Lord of the Rings film, but it's the Two Towers.
Ah, yeah. You can't
And
go wrong with any of them. But
right. And but I've had people say that's the worst one, and I'm like, I don't like. I mean, they're all pretty good, but I always
yeah,
had Return of the King as my least favorite.
mine too,
Which is
actually.
oh, okay. I was gonna say that's very controversial, I think, but
Mhm.
a lot of people have that as the best one. It's the one that won all the Oscars too.
I mean,
Um,
they're all again, like, even using the verbiage of like the worst one, I feel like can be a little misleading because they're
yeah,
all incredible. I think it's like splitting hairs and more of a just a preference thing of which one you prefer as opposed to which one you like less. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. And I think it part of that is probably because it's the first one I saw of those in theaters, and the Helm's
Mm,
Deep battle is just
yes.
absolutely awesome, and seeing that
Yeah.
in theaters was amazing, and playing that game
Mhm.
where doing the Helm's Deep battles like that's the kind
Yeah.
of stuff that really um, worked for me. You
And it
know,
very much set the tone for like the Throneses of the world, like
yeah,
these big spectacular battle scenes like that we see in the more modern stuff today. Like that's where the groundwork was laid. It's very much like the Phantom Menace of the fantasy genre in terms of the kind of ground it broke in
yeah.
terms of the visuals and things like that.
Well, and when you have with what Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter also did is not just inspiring me and stuff, but it also made a lot of money,
Yeah,
right? And that's
yeah,
when they're like, we're kicking out movies like this all the time.
hmm
And you get that. Like Hunger Games did the same thing, right? Hunger
yeah,
Games comes out and they're all like, "Oh, dystopia. Let's make all those movies."
yep,
Um, but yeah, Lord of the Rings showed that it could be profitable, it could be good, and they tried to push a lot of those movies out. But yeah, Two Towers is my favorite of those. Let's go with favorite fantasy TV show. I don't think I actually have to ask this, but
No, you
gonna
don't.
ask it.
It's Game of Thrones and that one's obvious, but I have some other kind of more off the beaten path answers ready as well
Oh,
because one of them's a guilty pleasure and one of them's not what you would think of as a television show, but it is a show and it's the one I've consumed by far more than any of them, so I have to mention it. So we'll start with the guilty pleasure. My ex was a big fan of that show Once Upon a Time. I don't know if you watched
oh
that.
hell yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, so she was big into it, and at first it was like a begrudging watch. It's like, all right, you pick this tonight, whatever. I'm picking something else tomorrow. But like as we started watching it, like I actually kind of got into it. I don't watch it too much these days, just because it's one of
Right.
those things. But at the time, I enjoyed it a lot, and it became a guilty pleasure to where I'd even be watching it like on my own sometimes. That's like a funny
Funny.
little thing.
I started watching that because I'm a big Disney guy, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, this sounds cool. And then the writers were Edward Kitsis and Adam Horowitz, I
Mhm.
believe, and they were writers on Lost, and they wrote a lot of
Oh,
great
okay.
episodes on Lost. So when they announced they were doing an ABC show with Disney stuff, I was like, sign me up.
Mhm.
The first season is really great. Not even in like a guilty pleasure way. Season one is
Mhm.
like I think legitimately great.
Yeah.
Season three is where I started having real problems with the whole Peter Pan arc
Mhm.
and stuff. But
Mhm.
I kind of fell off during season four, but I had never finished it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely couldn't tell you, like, I watched up to it would just be like
yeah,
when she'd throw it on, I'd be watching it and yeah. Um, but it was cool and it was very much kinda like an interesting take slash modernization of, a bunch of those old kind of fairy tales. So very cool. And the other one I have to mention is Critical Role. It's not, a
oh okay,
television show per se, but it's by far the one that I've watched the most. I mean, these are 4-hour episodes, and the campaigns are 100 plus sessions each. So I don't. I shudder to even think about how much time I've spent watching Critical Role over these last few years. But it's my favorite D&D live stream show. Anybody who's listening probably
until
knows what it is,
ours.
so I
Yeah,
don't. Yeah, I don't have to explain it. But it's I just love it. So yeah, I had to throw it in there as a mention.
nice. Um, no, that's funny. I've never seen Critical Role, but it's just funny that you said Once Upon a Time. I was wondering where you're going with when you're like guilty pleasure. I'm like, what type of
It's not one I
Outlander?
usually throw
Like,
out there. Hey, babe, you ever watched Once Upon a Time? Although it actually might work. It was my ex's favorite show, so.
yeah. It might work, yeah. Okay, favorite. Oh,
Well,
I
what's
gotta say
yours?
my favorite.
Yeah, you
Sorry,
gotta give us yours.
it's Game of Thrones.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Game of
Well,
Thrones.
do you have any other, like, do you have like an obscure kind of, maybe even it's not your favorite, just one that you kind of enjoy and go back to ever?
Hmm. Fantasy wise, it's funny because I don't really picture like Once Upon a Time being fantasy, right? Like, um,
Yeah, it's like
but
real world take on fantasy
like
stuff. Yeah.
fairy tales have fantasy elements, right?
Mhm.
Like you have wizards, you have princesses, and so like it's very
Mhm.
similar. Kingdoms, right? Like it
Yeah.
is very similar, and that's what like. So I don't know.
If you don't, off the top of it's okay. It's just,
House of the Dragon.
Yeah, that really obscure off the beaten path choice.
No, what I will say though is I really have enjoyed Rings of Power, which was something I was really looking forward to 2 years ago, and people were not really big on it. And I was watching it every week. Like,
Mhm.
I like this.
It
I
was
was that
good as hell, man. Like
I was that
I know.
Joey Tribbiani meme where he's like, "I like it," right? Like
Yeah,
that's what I was.
yeah.
And I was nervous when you were saying you were going to watch it for the first time. You had not seen it before this,
Mhm. Yep.
and I was like, well, let's see what Ron thinks.
And I loved it, dude. I thought it was great. And I think maybe because I don't have such a deep attachment to the source material in the books, maybe that like skews it. But you've read them and you enjoyed it too, so I can't even say that.
I
There's a lot
mean,
of
yeah,
vitriol towards it, but it just I thought it was really really good.
I've read him. I haven't read them a lot, and I like a lot of this stuff is based off the appendices too, which
Yeah.
are just there's not a lot there,
Hmm.
right? So people. I don't really know what people want from it, but that's that's what you get. I'd rather this than them trying to remake the first three books again. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like I'd rather
Yeah.
getting something new and original in the world.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Again, who wants to watch something that you know every twist and turn that's coming?
right.
That's like House of the Dragon did the same thing. Like I think all in Fire and Blood, all that was like known was that Aegon falls from his dragon, and obviously ends up, looking all charred and cooked and stuff. But adding the little wrinkle of Aemond being the one who like sent him off, that wasn't in the books, but like that was a shock and a really cool one. So like, I just yeah, I don't know, I don't get the being so like tribalist about the source material and wanting it to be exactly faithful when it's like, it's an adaptation, it's not a total retelling. Like just enjoy
Right.
it, man. You don't have to
The book
compare
is
it.
the book. You can read the book.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I don't know if I
it's not
give
going
more
anywhere. Yeah.
leeway. I don't know if I give more leeway because I like consider myself a writer, that it's like I see like all right, you can't make that work in the show,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
you got to flesh it out.
Hmm.
And you got to do and sometimes they make the right decisions with that and sometimes they make the wrong decisions with that. But I also don't get really up in arms when they make the wrong decisions in
Yeah.
that. It's like, "Oh, okay, that's what they did." Like
Hmm.
maybe back in the day I would have, but at my age now, I'm just kind of like, it is what it is. Like there's
Yeah.
no point in me getting upset about this type of stuff. Really
It,
not.
and it's so funny too because like, for anybody who listens to like our Marvel shows and our Star Wars shows, like we don't go out of our way to be critical by any means, but we very much call it how it is. And like if something isn't that great, we'll say it. But I don't know, when it comes to this genre, it's like I just want to dive in and enjoy it and not analyze every little last fiber of and like looking for things that are wrong. Like just it takes a lot for me to not like something in this kind of genre. Way more it takes way more in this for me to turn off of something than it does in any other sort of like genre or program.
Let's go favorite fantasy game.
Game. Okay, there's one answer for this, and it is Skyrim. It is, I think, the
Hmm.
perfect fantasy game. Have you played it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I
I
figured.
haven't beat it, but I have it on like three different
Oh,
systems.
Oh, okay. Oh, what? You never beat it? Oh man, we might have to do that for the channel sometime.
Yeah, yeah. I played it on 360. I have it on PS4 as
Oh,
well
okay.
now.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it is the perfect fantasy game. I think the world is huge, but it doesn't feel like boring or repetitive. There is, not to sound corny, literally a new adventure around every single corner. Like you could be going through the mountains, like to a point where you feel like you're about to go off the map, and it's like, oh, what the fuck's this door doing here? Like, you know what I mean? And it'll lead to like the coolest thing you ever saw. I love it so much, and just the like the fact that you can like have your own house and custom like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
you're essentially like living in the world. Like it's a very very cool game. I love it. Baldur's Gate 3, obviously that one's kind of a layup. We'll put Skyrim as my answer, but I also have to mention Baldur's Gate 3 obviously. And also a sort of off the beaten path one that I'm not sure if you ever heard of. Do you know A Plague Tale?
You know what? Is that one of the ones I have free from PlayStation I haven't played?
You if you do, you should. It is an awesome kind of game. It's like a sort of fantastical version of a 13th century France, and it's like the Black Plague on steroids. Basically, there's
Hmm.
like just these mountains.
I have Requiem of it.
Okay, that's the second one. The first
Yeah,
one is
I don't
called
have the first one.
Innocence. But yeah, the basic premise is that it's this Black Plague on steroids, basically, and all these like infected rats, like millions of them, just like wiping out like entire cities and towns and stuff. And you play as like a teenager, and her brother. I won't spoil it if you do decide to play it, but like her brother's got some funky stuff going on that's like connected to the plague, and because of that, you're being hunted by like the French kind of like government slash military thing. But it's a very good story. By the time I got to the end of Requiem, Jordan, no lie, literally tears pouring from my face. Like it takes a lot to get me like emotional in a video game. Like I can count on my one hand the amount of games that I've done that over the years, and this one might be at the top of the list. Like I was blown away at how emotional the end of this game was. So I highly recommend it.
Interesting. I've heard of it. I've heard good things. I didn't realize it was such a fantasy type game.
It's again, it's one of those that it might not fit your standard classical like what you think of, but it's one of those things where if you play it and if you had to put it in a box, the fantasy box is the one you would put it
Alrighty, I can play the sequel. I got that
in.
for
Yeah.
free.
Well, they
Uh,
both stand alone very well too. So
oh, do they?
yeah.
Okay, let's go with
What? Yeah. Wait. You didn't give us yours.
favorite fantasy game. So this is I've consistently said this is my favorite game of all time. I don't know if it still is, but it is up there. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I have fond memories of playing with it. I started playing it in 2015. It released, and we were in Florida, and my friend Andrew, my roommate, when I was working at Disney the second time,
Mhm.
was big into PlayStation. So he would go out and I felt like he pre-ordered every game. But I think I went to the store with him to pick this one up, or he had been playing it in our apartment, and I was watching him play it, and I was like, "Oh, I need this." So
Mhm.
I spent some of my money that I probably didn't really have as a Disney employee, and went to Target and bought The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
Ah, yes.
So I had never played the first two. I have them now on PC. I should play them, but I absolutely love this game. I started trying to read the books, never finished it, but um, watched the first season of the show, which I did enjoy the first season. By the time I was getting back around to the second season, I knew Cavill was leaving, and I was like, should
Yeah.
I actually keep watching? I don't know, right? Um, but there's just something about this world. I just felt like it was a very good story. Had a uh, the the level of detail in the game. Um, it was fun, and it was at that time where I actually started completing games. There was a big stretch before I got my PS2, my PS4. I got my PS4 in around Christmas of 2014, right before I moved to Florida for the college program,
Mhm.
and I beat like GTA 5 when I was down there, and uh, I started actually beating it. I do attribute that to Andrew holding me
Mm.
accountable and that kind of stuff. Because before that, when I had like my 360, I would kind of buy a new game and play it for a bit, and then I would immediately go back to playing FIFA, and that was my cycle,
Yeah.
right? And this is one of the games that I really beat and like actually beat it, loved it, and it was great to have a good fantasy game like this. I'm eagerly anticipating, The Witcher 4 that they're coming out with, and I think they're remastering the first one. So, looking forward to it.
That is one. So, like you mentioned, how you saw Lord of the Rings, and you're like, "What is this? A knockoff Harry Potter?" Like my first introduction to The Witcher, like was seeing it and being like, "Is this just like a knockoff Game of Thrones? What is this?" So, like,
Yeah,
I never really got into it. But especially now that we're starting the show, it's one that I am 100% going to circle back to. Probably the show
oh
and
yeah.
the games, to be honest with you.
You had like Witcher 3 is so good. Like you have to play that game. You can play without understanding the rest of it. They do like a little recap at the beginning or whatever.
Oh,
But
okay, cool, cool.
because I played it without playing the first two or without. So the way that it works is this guy wrote books, right? And then this company got the rights to the books. But what they started doing is the first two games take place after the books end,
Oh,
and
okay, okay.
the third one, takes place after all of that,
Hmm,
and kind of wrapped up Geralt's story. Um, so Witcher 4 is going to have a new protagonist.
okay.
Um, but yeah, this was something that like I just kind of jumped into, and it kind of works sometimes. Some of those stories work where you just get thrown in
Yeah,
to it, and you're like, I don't know everything, but like I'm liking going and reading this thing, or I like going and figuring out from this context clues of
dude, that's
that
Lord of
kind of
the
stuff.
Rings, that's Game of Thrones, like
Yeah,
that, they all do it. They drop you in at a point and they start feeding you all this lore, and it's like, wait a minute, I wanted to see that, you
yeah.
know,
I
like
own
more.
this game on PS4. I own it on Switch, and I own it on PC. It is. I haven't even
Nice.
played it on PC or Switch, but I was like, it came out. I gotta buy it again. Like it was one of those things where like I have to have it. You know.
That
Um,
is awesome.
I want to shout out too. You mentioned with Skyrim how you can buy a house and stuff. I want to
Mm,
shout out. This is not up there for me, but I've been playing Fable,
mm,
the original Fable, the anniversary edition. I bought it on Steam like a year or two ago. Was playing it this week, and that is one I remember my friend Jimmy having. I'd go over his house and watch him play because he had an Xbox. I didn't. I had a PS2. So he had an Xbox and it was Xbox exclusive. So I'd watch him play it, and that was one where you can actually get married and you can buy a house, and it's also kind of like um KOTOR as well, right? Where
okay.
your decisions choose if you end up being hero or
Oh, yeah, yeah,
villain
yeah.
type of thing. Um, but Fable, lots of fun there. I had Fable 3. I got it for free on Xbox 360 when they did like their monthly games. I enjoyed that one. A lot of people say it's the worst one. Um, but Fable 2 is actually usually held up in high regard, but you can't buy it anywhere. Fable 2 is not on the online stores. Neither
Huh.
is Fable 3. It's just Fable 1. So if you're trying to find Fable 2 or 3, it's like you have to get the disc and you have to have it backwards compatible, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Want to shout that out. And then, of course, if I was going more old school, I love those Lord of the Rings games, those early Lord of the Rings games,
Mhm.
Return of the King and Two Towers, Battle for Middle Earth. That got me into real time strategy games. I didn't really play any before that, but I was,
Yeah.
started playing them with that, and yeah, so the
Have
good days.
have you played the more like recent Lord of the Rings video games? I think it's like Shadow of Mordor or something like that.
I own them. I have not played them yet.
Okay, yeah, say I haven't played them, but I think they're on PS Plus now, so I'm definitely going to go in and catch up on those and probably the
I
coming
think they
months here.
gave one of them away for free, and then I think I bought the other one for $4
Oh yeah. Oh jeez.
So I
Okay.
was
Hopefully
like,
that's not telling of the quality.
no, people really rave about them, which is
Oh,
good.
good,
So,
good.
more than the Gollum game, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But that's something I do want to get around to. It's just
yeah,
haven't had the time.
yeah.
All right. So that is our favorite books. Sorry,
Yeah, I was gonna say we got
favorite
one more.
fantasy book.
So I have to. I mean, I went on this whole spiel before about how I got out of reading for a very long time, and A Song of Ice and Fire is what has brought me back to reading.
Hmm.
Uh, and as I mentioned, I'm about 3/4 of the way through the third one, so I can't really count that yet. So far, it's my favorite, but I just feel like it would be a bit disingenuous to say my favorite fantasy book is a book that I haven't finished yet. But we'll go with Clash of Kings because it's my favorite of the two that I've read so far. It's the second one. It's where things really kind of start to pop off and get going, much like in the show. You know, some people said that the first season was a little slow for their liking. I would say that maybe they don't appreciate good setup and storytelling, but that's neither here nor there. But I loved the second one. It was great. The Danny's vision and the House of the Undying is just so much more fleshed out. Basically, everything is so much more fleshed out. You know, we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier because the books give you so much more room and you don't have these constraints that you do in television and stuff. So just the way that it gives a whole new perspective on this stuff that, you know, I watched now or God, how long ago? 13 years ago, like when it first started. So
Yeah.
like to get these new perspectives is really cool. So I would say Clash of Kings will be my answer. But I also wanted to shout out the series of unfortunate events books that you mentioned,
Yes.
as well as one we haven't talked about. But this was a book that we read for school, so I'd imagine you did too. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
Yeah, the
Chronicles of
Narnia
Narnia.
books.
Yeah, those were a lot of fun
Another
growing up
Harry
too.
Potter knockoff. I was like, what
Yeah.
is this?
Oh my god. You're watching like SpongeBob as a kid. Is this a Harry Potter knockoff?
He's got glasses. What is
Yeah.
this? Arthur, the Harry Potter knockoff?
Not Arthur. Oh my gosh.
um, no. So you think though, like in a couple weeks, it's gonna be a Storm of Swords?
It's going to be. Yeah. Like
Okay.
I'm creeping ever closer and the setup keeps going for the red wedding and it's like I just
Hmm.
have this pit in my stomach as I get closer to it. But like it's incredible. It's the longest of the books as well and it just like I've
Yeah.
just been like I have to pry it out of my hand at night. Like I try not to go too crazy, but I try to give myself at least like 40 minutes to an hour of reading or night, and every single night I end up like I look at the clock, I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't put it
Yeah.
down. So yeah, I think just have to say Clash, but man, Storm of Swords is really damn good.
You say that's the longest one, but I heard Winds of Winter is the longest. It's going on
Yeah,
13 years.
yeah. No,
and,
I
and
think
George still hasn't finished it.
I was gonna
So,
say we're referring to books that exist. Yeah.
yeah. Um okay.
Dude's written enough blogs in the last 2 years to write, the word count of 17 Winds of Winter.
But
He can't
he said in
finish
a
the damn
thing
book.
before he has 1,500 pages done. I'm pretty sure he said he had 1,500 manuscript pages done.
Ugh, I don't know
This book
how long
is
does he want to
big.
make it? Like what the hell?
Yeah, I do think he kind of got screwed by not doing the time skip he wanted to do,
Mhm.
and or by just making some of these kids so young, and
Yeah.
it's put him in a spot now where he's like, I don't know how to get to the point where I gotta get these characters back over there.
Mhm.
And it's causing him to just keep writing. He's like,
Yeah.
I guess this was gonna be originally 3 books. It's gonna be five. Then it's gonna be six. No, now it's seven.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for his next update to be like, I finished Wins, but this is gonna be a 9 book series now. And you're
Yeah.
like, whoa, this is never getting done.
Well, I think that's the biggest bummer of it too, because like even if he does put out wins, then we have to wait, another eternity for a Dream of Spring, and like in all likelihood, that's not coming in George's lifetime. He's an older person.
Well,
Like,
I don't know. I do think if he gets through this book, which is the one where he needs to get through to get
Mhm,
everybody in the right spot,
mhm,
I think Dream of Spring can get finished quickly.
mm.
I do.
That is true.
Maybe I'm just an optimist, but I do think that, or he's going to try to be writing both of these at the same time. And
Mm,
like the author that he said, hey, I wish I would have had these all done before print.
yeah,
Maybe he gets both these done and they're able to put them both out in a year apart. And the publisher's like, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. But
that would be tremendous. He will be
I doubt
forgiven
that
if
too.
that's the case.
I doubt that too, though, because I think the publisher would be like, give me the book. It's been
Yeah.
13 years. I'm
Give
publishing
it
it.
to
All
me.
right.
Yeah. I don't even care if it's done.
Yeah. We'll publish what you got. Put to be continued at the end,
Yeah.
and we'll publish what you got.
What Tolkien's got like unfinished tales that they put out. Whatever.
Yeah.
Just make this
Yeah.
an unfinished tales.
Um, yeah, it's funny. You say Clash of Kings. That's the one that's actually taken me the longest to get through. I've been going on that for about 14 years, but 12 years. But Game of Thrones, I actually think is my favorite out of the two. Out of
Mm.
those, I don't know why I'm struggling with Clash so much, but I am. Uh,
I would recommend, like, if it's been a while too, I think you may go into it with a much fresher perspective, being,
yeah,
kind of being our
I could.
age now.
I probably should restart it, but I'm so close to finishing it.
Yeah,
So
no,
maybe I
if
finish
you
it
know where
and
you
then I
were.
go back and restart.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
I'm like, I have finished it, but I'm gonna catch up on what I
yeah.
what I forgot. Um,
All right, let's hear yours.
my my favorite book. I have constantly said this is my favorite book of all time. That's probably changed as well recently as well. But this is Harry Potter and the Half Blood Prince. This is the
Mm,
sixth book. Um, I just remember the build up to that stuff, man. It was insane. I kind of miss this type of stuff. We went to a bookstore that doesn't even exist anymore, near my mom's work, which also doesn't exist anymore. My mom works for a different company because that one got bought out. It was a used bookstore, but they would also sell new books. But you could, I used to go there all the time, and I would get a used book, I would read it, and then you could return it and get credit that you could build and get another
oh,
used book out of it and stuff. Like,
cool,
it was
cool.
really cool. And
Like a different take
they,
on a library, basically. Like
yeah, and
an
they had,
incentive-based library.
yeah, because you could either keep the book, right, if you bought
Yeah,
it, or yeah, turn it back in, get credit, get another book.
that's
It was
awesome.
really cool. And um they had midnight releases for the
Dude,
Harry Potter books. And
you just unlocked a memory in my brain, but continue.
those were legit, man. I before you could just be like, I got to get it on download,
Mhm.
hit my Kindle at midnight. You know, it's like I had to go to the place,
Mhm.
and it would be an event. Like my mom would let me; she would go with me, and we'd have a fun time. And like I won a hat for Order of the Phoenix when they did the Order of the Phoenix ones. They were giving out hats, and I have an Order of the Phoenix Scholastic hat. You know,
Yeah.
um, and we went there for book 5 and book 6. Book 7, we were actually on our way to Disney, and my sister lived in South Carolina at the time, and I pre-ordered it at a bookstore in her mall. So
Mm,
when we were stopping to visit her the next day, I was able
smart.
to go pick up my copy of Deathly Hallows, and I read it the whole way down. And I read it
Nice.
every night at the hotel after the parks, and I finished it in Boardwalk at Disney World.
Nice.
Um, but the sixth book, was a midnight release. I just remember sitting in the car on the way home. I'm reading, my mom's just like quiet driving back. It's like 1
Yeah.
a.m., and I'm like reading. I would stay up late reading it. Uh, so that was, and then it had like a huge twist in it that I was a big fan of. It was one of those books where it just had a lasting,
Mm.
impact on me. And that's my favorite. So it's funny. I was able to kind of fit in all of my favorite franchises in each one of these answers.
Nice. Good stuff. So I mentioned you unlocked a memory in my brain. I went to the midnight release for Goblet of Fire, and dude, it was awesome. We went to
Mm.
it was a Barnes and Noble, probably like 10 minutes from our house, and it just, yeah, literally would have never remembered doing that. But it just, yeah, good times, good memories. I remember they had like all like you said, like little prizes and stuff they were
Yeah.
doing. They had like a little like pizza for everybody and stuff. It was like a little party. It was awesome.
we did the movie midnight releases as well, and it was just
Yes.
something that when it was Harry Potter, we did that, me and my mom,
Mhm. Yeah. A dying, or not even a dying art, a dead art, unfortunately, with,
Yeah. 3 p.m. on a
movies.
Thursday.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
this feels great.
yeah. And, like, with games, same thing. We used to, park our asses outside of GameStop at midnight
I
and
still
go get.
do.
Oh,
I
really?
for my Pokemon releases, GameStop is right across the street, actually. It
Oh,
is
okay.
a 2-minute drive. So I will on Pokemon releases, I pre-order it ahead of time and then I drive myself there at midnight
Mhm.
and stand in line, pick it up, get back home, put the cartridge in.
Nice.
It's so much more rewarding than being like,
Mhm.
yeah, press pre-download a couple days in advance and
Yeah.
then I'll play at midnight. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're very much right, and I respect the hell out of that. You're very much one of the last of a dying breed, that's for sure.
It's always busy there too, actually, for
Wow.
Pokemon releases.
Oh, good, good, good. I'm
Always.
glad to hear it's still at least relatively alive and well in some places.
Yeah. Um. Okay. Last questions we have here. Worst fantasy movie or show you've seen. You may not have an answer. You've been thinking
Mhm.
about it for an hour and 16 minutes. I
Yeah.
have two that I need to shout out here.
Yeah,
So
I really am having a tough time. I can't quite think of anything that I haven't like just didn't enjoy from the genre. Like anything that I've picked up has been something that I've really liked. So like it may be a bit of a cop out, but I just, as it relates to this genre, there isn't really anything for me that's like just straight dog shit, you know what I mean?
so before I left for college program the first time, 2013. It's like July 2013. I'm starting to see everybody for the last time before I leave, you know. And my cousin Brandon comes over and he's about 6 years younger than me and we kind of grew up, just uh watching all kinds of stuff, sharing our media with each other. And we stumbled upon this. Um it was on Netflix, but it was not in a Netflix original or anything.
Hmm.
It's a movie from 2007. It's called In the Name of the King, a Dungeon Siege tale. So it's based off a game called Dungeon Siege, and it's directed by what Uwe Boll. He does like every awful movie. You get Jason Statham, Ray Liotta, John Rhys Davies. Actually, he's in it. Burt Reynolds, Matthew Lillard, Ron Perlman, Christina Loken. Uh, really weird cast,
Just an
right? You're like,
insane ensemble of people. Yeah.
and it flopped. It's got a 4% on Rotten Tomatoes. Okay.
You said it's on Netflix. I'm gonna watch it, I think.
It's not anymore. No,
Oh,
it's on Prime, but you have to pay
oh, okay.
for it. It's not
Ah. Mm.
$3 to rent. It's actually worth $3, I'd say.
Yeah.
Um, just for the laughs you get from it. It is
Mhm.
awful. It is really bad. And it still launched a franchise. The second one was a straight to DVD. This one was in theaters. The second one was straight to DVD, and they had to replace most of that cast. And they go replace Jason Statham, and they're like, we got to get
We can't
somebody
afford these
cheaper.
people.
They get Dolph Lundgren.
Like 25 years after his prime, Dolph Lundgren.
Dolph Lundgren, and I forget who else was in the sequel, but
Bunch of people who
you could
needed a
tell
paycheck.
you could tell the budget was really slashed because the first one it's like takes place in the fantasy world.
Mhm.
The second one becomes a portal fantasy where
Oh, okay.
Dolph Lundgren is in our real world and kind of falls into their world. So he's just wearing jeans and a leather jacket the whole time instead of having actual costume department. And he's just running through the woods in what looks like Canada, and you're like,
That's great.
yeah, this is awful. Then the third one starred the guy from Prison Break, Dominic West or whatever
I
his
know
name
the
was.
guy you're talking. I know the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And that one again was another one that like takes place in our world. He goes to their world, then he comes back into our world, and he has like this dragon chasing him as he's driving. It's awful. Um, but the first one is actually like funny. The second one and the third one, I did watch those, and I was like, okay, the Dolph Lundgren one is pretty funny as well.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? This is
Yeah.
awful. But the first one, really bad. And then on program, one of my friends wanted to go see Mortal Instruments City of Bones, and that is really bad movie based off a book.
So I think I may have one, but again, it's tough because it's bad, but I genuinely do enjoy it. Maybe even a little more than just in a so bad it's good kind of way. Have you ever seen Army of Darkness?
No.
It's the third Evil Dead movie, but it's just a total departure from what the first two were. Like Bruce Campbell, you saying Dolph Lundgren with the jeans made me think of it because he goes back in time and he's basically Ash from the Evil Dead movies, chainsaw and all that stuff, but he's transported into this like medieval dark fantasy world. It's got a lot of it feels like very labyrinthy at times. You know what I mean? It's got a really cool vibe to it, and it's quote unquote horror, but it's not at all. It horror in the way of like White Walkers and orcs are horror ish. You know what I mean? So it's not like a tough watch if you're not into horror or anything like that. It's corny as hell, but it's super fun. I definitely recommend checking it out.
Alrighty. Well, that I think is our show. Anything else before we start
we
wrapping up?
we touched a little bit on D&D via Critical Role, but just we both play that as well. Our listeners would like to know. We've got some really fun ideas on how we can incorporate that here on the channel. Maybe run some sessions in the future. There's some logistics we're figuring out.
Yeah.
But just wanted to throw it in there that we're massive D&D heads, and that'll also be something that is an aspect of this channel in the future. So if that's your bag, we've got something for you as well.
And I just want to thank you, Ron, because it is something that I wasn't sure I'd ever want to get into because I felt like it's so daunting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you've been really great at helping me, Jack, Chris, people that were not as familiar with it, and helping us with patience on when we kind of break the rules and when we getting us set up with the character sheets and helping us understand what we're actually supposed to be doing. So
yeah,
it's something that I feel like sometimes people in those circles, and I could be wrong, but I feel like sometimes people in certain circles will be like, well, I'm not going to teach you. So I just want to
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, because it can be a lot to teach people, but I find that when you have like people who are genuinely willing to put the time in and like actually want to do it, yeah, it can be. It's a very fun experience, and it's something that for years now I've really enjoyed, and it's been a big part of my life. So being able to teach all of you guys and kind of share that stuff with you it's been great, and I can't wait to keep that going and incorporate it here into the channel for sure.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff that we'll be doing on here. Like we said, Rings of Power, episodes 1 through 3 of season 2, we'll be discussing in the next episode. And then we'll be doing, the weekly drops from there until episode 8. Then we'll kind of talk probably Game of Thrones and just kind of dive into the world of Westeros. And then we'll be preparing for War of the Rohirrim, the Lord of the Rings anime film, in December 2025. Very open year, I feel like, so far. We'll find out, though. And then 2026 is Hunt for Gollum. Like, we're heading right for that. And then I'm sure 2026 will also get House of the Dragon season 3.
Yep. And we got Night of the Seven Kingdoms next
in
year
2025.
Well.
Yep.
So it's open, but there's also some good stuff, and it's going to allow us to be like creative and do fun stuff, and not just be beholden to like a lot of
covering a show. Yeah.
Yes, which is kind of what the box that we find ourselves in sometimes on our like Marvel shows, and like even Pod Awakens a little bit, with the exception of when we break for our like drafts and our other fun little games. So basically all that stuff is what we're incorporating here, but on a much bigger scale, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. I hope everyone has enjoyed our almost hour and a half conversation here of getting to know each other. And you know what? We even got to know each other a little bit better throughout this as well. So hopefully the listeners feel like they have gotten to know us. and that they hopefully look forward to all of what we're going to be sharing here on the Fantasy Folk. So thank you all for watching and listening along. We will catch you next time.